And finally, I see this dirt road leading behind a gas station. I look up as I'm filming, there's a giant...
Most of the nomads that I've met here in Thailand typically stay in hostels, hotels, or long-term apartments, but not this guy. In today's video, you're going to hear from somebody who truly does take nomading to the absolute extreme. Riding across the United States with nothing but 2 wheels, a tent, and a backpack, this YouTuber is the literal definition of a free spirit. And now he's out here trying to conquer Southeast Asia. From stealth camping in the Thai jungles to figuring out whether or not he will or won't get eaten by tigers, this interview truly does have it all. So stick around, kick back, and enjoy the ride. Okay, Joe, welcome to the channel.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks.
Perhaps you could start by telling us where you're from and what it is that you do.
So I'm from the United States, a state called Virginia, and a small town called Christiansburg, which is high up in the Appalachian Mountains. And I've essentially been living off the back of a motorcycle for the last 5 years.
And you document your journeys on YouTube, going around filming the adventures.
I do indeed. So a big part of this is my sort of trying to keep my monthly expenses down to an absolute minimum, which facilitates the need to camp in the woods for free, which I do for most of the year, and sort of save my money, all year, so I can take trips like this and sort of work on motorbikes in my spare time for about a month out of the year. Back in the States, we have a lot of big motorcycle related events, and so I work 3 of those a year, and just get my expenses down to an absolute minimum and live the cheap life and the nomad life and all of that. So
your channel's primarily based is in the US?
Yes. Well, primarily I'm in the US for about 8 months out of the year, but typically I'm kind of a snowbird. When it starts to get cold, that's when I scatter and go somewhere else, like Thailand or Mexico, or last winter I was in Vietnam, and just kind of renting scooters and kind of doing the same thing I do back in the States of just strapping a bunch of camping equipment to the back of it and taking off into the woods and looking for the free spots in the jungle, as it were. So
awesome. So what motivated you to start your channel and to start doing this?
So before this, I had a series of random kind of menial labor-oriented jobs, construction. I drove a box truck. I worked for a furniture moving company, and always had some kind of little hustles on the side that I would do. But it had sort of reached a point where it wasn't really making me feel fulfilled. And it wasn't something that I saw myself doing long-term, working those kind of jobs. And because I always wanted to sort of be my own boss and have the freedom to be able to travel. I sort of told my boss, as soon as the weather gets good, I'm taking off, and gave him a heads up a couple months in advance, and rode down to Florida. And that was my first experience living off the back of a motorcycle and working these sort of trade show gigs, or not trade show, just motorcycle oriented gigs. And gradually I learned how to work on the bikes and got a better job, and then a better job, and then a better job. And people knew me as a reliable sort of a guy that would ride across the country on my bike, and show up on time and do a good job, do good work. And it was really enjoyable, mate. I mean, I'm essentially like, it was a level of freedom that I hadn't yet experienced in my working life.
That's really interesting, because essentially the theme of your channel, you kind of built your life around it. Was this before you even started the channel? Kind of living that lifestyle?
Yes. Yeah. So I've been living off the back of a motorcycle essentially for the last 5 years. And then I started my channel like 3 years ago. So I've been doing it for a couple of years before I started the channel. Wasn't really interested in doing a channel. It just sounded like a bunch of extra work that I wasn't into. But what I discovered was that in living that kind of a lifestyle, which a lot of people were very envious of, they would see and they'd be, I felt a lack of a sense of purpose, even though I'm working like those motorcycle rallies and things like that. There was just a sense of something being missing. And I just needed more of where I'd been sort of aimlessly wandering from place to place and kind of drifting around the United States. I'm kind of like just showing up and there I am. And okay, it's just the same as the last place, just everybody looks different. And, you know, and so I needed a deeper sense of purpose. And for me, that became ultimately sharing this stuff through social media and things like that. And starting the YouTube channel sort of allowed me to sort of like, at the end of the day, feel like I had done something to, in whatever strange way, contribute to society, even just as entertainment value, you know, because I think it's just, most people just look at the channel and it's just entertaining, and they look at it, they're like, wow, I would never want to do that. That looks absolutely miserable. And so I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to show that, and maybe for a brief period in the day, make somebody forget about whatever troubles they're going through. And if I can do that, that's fantastic.
And so how long were you shooting videos in the United States before you took your big trips abroad to places like Thailand?
So I had just started my channel in 2020, I guess, late summer of 2020, I think is when I started. And then in the winter of 2020, I had gone down to Mexico, went to Baja California, and those were some of my first videos out of the country.
Those who haven't seen your channel, you do roadside camping. You kind of like combine motorbikes with this stealth camping culture that we see on YouTube.
Indeed.
Which is a very interesting combination. But once you take that outside of the US, were you not scared to go to Mexico? And
oh, I was terrified. I had a mentor named Scooter Champ Scotty, and he's got a fairly sizable channel. And I sort of learned from him because he'd been living off his motorcycle for the last 30 years. 30 years, yeah, and doing his YouTube channel for like a decade before it got taken down for something that I'm not going to get into. But anyway, but he started another one, Scooter Tramp Scotty. And so he sort of, I was fortunate because he sort of held me by the hand and took me down there for my first Mexico trip. My Spanish was not very good. I did not know how to get around in that country, but at least I was not alone. And so I sort of learned from him. I was absolutely terrified that first trip, especially once we split ways, you know, and I started doing my own thing because he's a bit older and not as into, you know, doing as much riding around and adventuring and all that. So it was a rush, man. It was a total adrenaline rush, going off on your own into Mexico on a motorbike, camping in the middle of nowhere. Essentially, and worried, am I going to die, you know, and all of that. And I've never quite been able to recapture the adrenaline and everything else that I did from that first trip.
Hey there, really hope you're enjoying the interview. If you are, and if you want to ask questions to me and any of my guests directly, then head on over to Nomad School. Nomad School is my free online community with over 1,000 digital nomads and expats. By signing up for free at Nomad School, not only will you gain access to an amazing network of like-minded individuals, but you'll also gain access to high-quality training courses absolutely free. All you have to do to request an invite is to scroll down, click on the link in the description, or go to nomadschool.com. All right, back to the interview. And how do you feel about doing it out here in Southeast Asia? Because to me, that's pretty crazy. Watching your previous videos, and we spoke briefly about the wild elephants, the tigers.
Yes. I was not aware of the wild elephants until after the fact. For some reason, maybe I just had my blinders on. I thought the elephants were in the south of Thailand, but no, it turns out they're all over Thailand, especially around Chiang Mai. And yeah, this has got one of the most vibrant wild elephant populations in Thailand, as it turns out. The one thing that really freaked me out were the tigers. And I did some research, and apparently they're sort of in another place in Thailand and not as much of a concern around here, or not a concern at all, supposedly, allegedly, you know, but who knows?
What are some of the biggest challenges? I mean, I imagine there's quite a few in doing what you're doing.
The biggest thing is learning to work from a budget, you know, excuse me. If you're doing this long term, you absolutely have to be able to work from a budget. And be able to cut down the little creature comforts like going to the coffee shop and things like that. That's the biggest challenge. The other challenge is loneliness because I don't tend to stay in one place for longer than 6 weeks usually. And so if I go somewhere else, I'm in a completely new place without any friends. And so I had to sort of learn to socialize and make friends very quickly because it's an absolutely crucial part to my happiness and my sort of general state of well-being is a certain amount of socialization time, on a daily basis with other people.
Have you got any crazy stories from your travels?
Oh man, I got so many crazy stories, but
Can
you're
we hear
putting me on
some?
the spot, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to. I've got crazy stories for decades, bro.
What's the craziest thing?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, I guess one of the more recent ones that comes to mind, I was camping in the state of Virginia, not far from where I grew up. And I had found this place off the road to make camp. I'd been riding all day looking for a spot and just could not find anything because the place is way up in the mountains. It's really jagged. Any level piece of land has already got a house on it, So I just cannot find my stealth camping spot. And finally, I see this dirt road leading behind a gas station. And so I go check it out on the bike. And a nice flat spot. This is going to be perfect. It's got trees overhead. I'm going to be in the shade. But I hear something out of, just faint sort of rustling in the background. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. Like maybe a raccoon or a squirrel or something over there. And so I go back to preparing my campsite for the night, as it were. And get everything ready. I take my GoPro out and I'm like, oh, hey, doing my YouTube thing. Oh, hey, it's Joe. I'm out here. Finally, I found a camping spot. I look up as I'm filming about 50 foot off the ground. There's a giant black bear in the tree right above where I've been making my camp and everything like that. And I'm just like, I thought I heard something around here that looks like a full grown bear. Sounds like you're ruining my spot for me, buddy. And so I grab my bear spray and I'm just looking at this bear and it's looking at me, and it's doing whatever it's doing up there. It was a walnut tree. And so it's late in the season, winter's setting in. And so it's just munching down on these walnuts, which are abundant up in the top of this tree, and probably didn't give a hell about me, but needless to say, I got my ass out of there pretty quick.
What would you say has been the most rewarding experience doing what you're doing? Is it the YouTube? Is it the freedom?
I think the most rewarding thing is meeting people on the road like yourself, and talking to them and explain what I've been doing, and sometimes you just get this look of like absolute wonder come over their face of just absolute happiness and wow, you're doing that. That's so cool. And you can maybe even see the gears turning in this person's head just from having interacted with you, that maybe they're formulating their own, even if it's not necessarily what I do, maybe they've got that one thing that they've always wanted to do. And maybe that finally gives them enough license that they can finally go out and do it, and everybody else has got that. Everybody's got that one thing that they've always wanted to do, but for whatever reason, they just, society's kept them down or whatever, or maybe they just have too much of a fatalistic attitude toward life and they just have accepted, oh, it's never going to happen. Well, I'm the proof that it can happen, and you can follow your dreams, absolutely.
It's one of those things that a lot of people think they'd like to do, but kind of just don't have the balls to do it, right? Until they see somebody else doing it.
Exactly. And I would have been the same way. I can totally relate to that because I was the same way until I interacted with some people that were doing what it was that I wanted to do. And then it was like, I had a license to do it. I'm like, well, shit, I just met this guy. He's been doing it for 30 years. Scooter Tramp Scotty. He's just a regular guy. I'm just a regular guy. So I can do what he does. What one man can do, another can do. You think you might be interested in living kind of like this? Well, what are you doing next weekend? Plan a trip, just freaking you got to pull the trigger in life and do it, and don't put it off. Don't put off your happiness. I think in the West in particular, and America specifically, People tend to be very career focused, almost to the exclusion of their happiness, and, if you're going to get what you deserve out of life, which is, a ration of happiness, I think everybody's entitled to, you have to take it. It's not just going to land in your lap. You have to put the wheels in motion to go after it. And it takes some effort and some work and some, forgive the expression, some balls.
Yeah, that's great advice, man.
Yeah.
And what's next for you?
So what's next is, so I go back to the Philippines. Unfortunately, my time in Thailand is running out. I've been here for almost 30 days. And so I go back to the Philippines. I intend to stay there for a little bit and then jump around to some of the smaller islands and rent some motorbikes and do the same thing, go camping in the jungle and do some research on the history and the local wildlife that could possibly kill me. And that always makes for interesting content. I think people like it when the closer I come to danger, it seems to be the more miserable I am too, the more I suffer. Yeah. People, I always say I suffer so you don't have to.
So you've just done Chiang Mai. Yep. You're off to the Philippines next.
Yes, sir.
How can people follow this adventure?
So Dirty Motorcycle Vagabond. It's a little wordy, I know. I came up with it 3 years ago and liked how it sounded. You can do DMV for short, and I think a lot of my stuff will come up. Yeah, I'm on Instagram, same thing, Dirty Motorcycle Vagabond. I rarely use the Instagram. I use it more as like for the messaging, the private messaging feature. But if anybody wants to get a hold of me, I've got an email address. It's listed on my channel, the main page of the channel. But yeah.
And I'll put links to all of those in the description if anyone wants to go and check it out. And Joe, thanks very much for coming on.
Awesome. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you. Cheers.